The Bible, as we know, is a collection of books which have been written by different authors at different points of time. So how was it decided which books should be included in the Bible and which should not? Let's find out. One of the terms used in describing the books that belong in Scripture is the word canon. This comes from the Greek word canon, meaning reed or measurement. Today, a canonical book is one that the Church acknowledges as belonging to its list of sacred books as inspired by God, and is a measuring rod for our faith and morals. Let us first have a look at the Old Testament of the Catholic Bible, which is essentially the Hebrew or the Jewish Bible known as the Tanakh. The Hebrew Bible consists of three parts: the law, that is Torah, the prophets, Nebiim, and the writings, Ketubim. Tanakh is formed from the first letters of the Hebrew names of these parts. Within Judaism, the development of the canon was a lengthy process. As various writings were used repeatedly in Jewish communities, these works were gradually recognized as having authority for Jewish belief and practice. The first section of the Hebrew Bible to be granted authoritative status was the Torah. By 400 BC, the law or Torah was generally recognized in all Jewish communities as authoritative. The next group of writings given authoritative status was the prophets. By approximately 200 BC, the Jewish community had accepted these prophetic writings which had common concerns with the Torah, such as obedience to the covenant, as normative. The third section of the Hebrew canon remained undefined for several centuries after the law and the prophets had gained authoritative status. While most of the writings were accepted with little or no controversy, the authority of other works such as Ecclesiastes, Ezekiel, Esther, and the Song of Solomon was initially disputed by some Jews. Furthermore, other writings that were later not accorded authoritative status were being accepted and used as sacred scripture by some Jewish groups. Although it is believed that the Hebrew canon was authoritatively closed by the Council of Chamnia, which was held around 90 AD, this claim is contested by other scholars who believe its final canonization occurred only in the 2nd century AD. This information is quite important, as this means that even when it was during the time of Jesus, there were competing opinions on what books actually belonged in the Jewish Bible. Another point to note is that the Jewish and the Christian arrangement of the books is not casual or accidental. A real theological issue is involved. In the Jewish understanding, the Torah is the center of revelation. In Christianity, Jesus is the center of revelation. Therefore, while in the Hebrew Bible we have the Pentateuch followed by the prophets and then the writings, in the Catholic Bible, the prophets are at the end of the Old Testament, followed immediately by the Gospels in the New Testament. Before we move to the New Testament, let's address the question of the difference between the Catholic and the Protestant Bibles. The Catholic Bible has 46 books of the Old Testament and 27 books of the New Testament, taking the total to 73 books. However, while the Protestant Bible has the same 27 books in the New Testament, it has 7 fewer books of the Old Testament compared to the Catholic Bible. So did the Catholic Church add books or did the Protestant Church remove books? The answer is closely connected with the Hebrew Bible. Around 300 to 200 BC, the Jewish population was widespread. Many Jews, especially those further from Israel, grew up learning and speaking Greek and not ancient Hebrew. While the law and the prophets remained tremendously important to the Jewish people, the Hebrew Bible became unreadable to the non-Hebrew speaking Jews. Therefore, there was a need to translate the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. The Greek version, known as the Septuagint, welcomed by the Alexandrian Jews, spread quickly throughout the countries in which Greek was spoken. It was utilized by different writers and replaced the original text in liturgical services. By the 1st century, the Septuagint was the Bible of Greek-speaking Jews, and so was the most frequently used version of the Old Testament in the early church. Even the writers of the New Testament made use of it, borrowing from it most of their citations. So far so good, but there is a slight problem. The Greek-speaking Jews of the diaspora in Alexandria and Egypt translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, and they took over also some other books which were originally written in Greek and added them to their collections. This has been called the Alexandrian Canon or the Greek Canon, and the corresponding books in this canon are called Deuterocanonical writings. The term Deuterocanonical includes those books which are responsible for the difference between the Catholic and the Protestant Bibles. These are Tobit, Judith, Wisdom, Sirach, Baruch, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and parts of Esther and Daniel. The Roman Catholic Church, following the ancient tradition of the Christian Church, holds the Deuterocanonical books of the Old Testament to be sacred and inspired and therefore canonical. The Protestants, on the other hand, adopted the Jewish canon, which includes only those books which were written in Hebrew and Aramaic. Let's now have a look at the New Testament. Though the Catholics and Protestants do not differ from each other about the books of the New Testament, there was quite a bit of debate regarding the New Testament canon. The Gospel of Mark is believed to be the earliest Gospel written around 60 to 70 AD, and the Gospel of John is believed to be the last Gospel to be written around 110 to 120 AD. Some of the books which were widely contested were the books of Hebrews, Revelation, and the Gospel of John. So while the church councils began to agree upon the canon by the 4th century AD, they were not given solemn approval by the church until the Council of Trent in April of 1546. So what are the criteria for deciding which book made it into the Bible and which did not? There are 4 broad criteria. First is apostolic origin. The writing had to be attributed to or based on the preaching or teaching of the first generation apostles or their closest companions. Second is universal acceptance. The writing had to be acknowledged by all major Christian communities in the Mediterranean world. Third is liturgical use. The writings had to be read publicly along with the Old Testament when the early Christians gathered for their weekly worship service. And lastly, the writings had to have a consistent message. They had to contain theological ideas compatible with other accepted Christian writings. Do you remember the 2006 novel by Dan Brown, which was then made into a movie titled The Da Vinci Code? It did create quite a stir back then, as it referred to 2 unheard of Gospels, the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Philip. There are also other Gospels which you would have probably not heard of. We have the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Peter, and the Gospel of James. However, these texts are not in the Bible, as these texts taught viewpoints that contrasted with 2nd century Christians. The Bible contains only those books which fulfill the 4 criteria. So this in short is how we got the Bible as we know it today. We now need to zoom in a little bit and get to know what is the content of these books and what kind of language is used in them to help us understand their true message. Do write in the comments section which is your favorite gospel passage and also any questions that you might have, and I'll do my best to answer them. Stay tuned for the next episode of The Bible Explained. God bless.